We're back. We're going to answer some questions for the next kind of 10, 15 minutes that you guys have put in. So, Karl, is it actually possible to use social media for God's glory, or is it actually just a distraction from life?
Yeah, I think it can absolutely. I mean, it is distraction. It has all the negatives, but there are lots of ways that you can actually interact. Be very careful about getting into Twitter and Facebook arguments. They can be a godless waste of time.
Rabbit hole.
But you never know that where you just hang in there. If you don't use vitriol, if you call out vitriol, if you're godly in your behaviour and you ask good questions, there is possibility. I had an interaction last week, which in the end turned out to be pretty helpful.
Yeah.
And I think that there are things like be thoughtful about what you post. I mean, for those of you who love cats, knock yourself out. But think about, if you're reading a verse and a verse speaks to you, whack it up there. Just put pieces and point people to where they can kind of get more information or reflect on the bigger questions of life. So it's a danger, but absolutely it can be used for the gospel and the kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question. How should we as Christians be thinking about and engaging in the discussion around the referendum on the voice of Parliament?
I've taken a personal view that I'll not take a position on it. I think that read broadly, and I think that's what I would say. And right now there's a lot of discussion about the fact that there's a yes case out there and there's a no case out there, and you should read both of them. There's been interaction between, if you want to see a couple of different views, Dr. Michael Jensen, who's an Anglican here in Sydney, has written a case for the yes vote, and that was responded to by Stephen Shavora, who's teaches at a Catholic college, although he's not Catholic in his background. He's I think he might be Presbyterian, and then Michael Jensen, as always happened, has written a response to Stephen Shavora's response.
Yeah.
One of the things to keep in mind for everybody listening. Right now, there are people on both sides who are followers of Jesus and are deeply committed Christians who are on both sides of this. So in a way, it's not like, oh, that's the Christian side. I would counsel against trying to pitch one side as a Christian side. There are different views about how we respond to a significant issue within our community, and I would say look at those views. I think there's, again, as always happens, there's a whole bunch of personality assassinations going on out there. Avoid those like the plague. Avoid some of the more extreme ends of what's being said.
Yeah.
But I think that Michael Jensen and Stephen Shavora's, from the deeply committed Christian positions, will give you two sides to that discussion.
Yeah, cool. No, that's a good answer. Why is technology always the first to blame rather than what people are being taught?
Yeah, fair point. Technology is so pervasive, and it always has been, and it will continue to be. I mean, this is not my area, but we didn't even bring up AI, and there's a whole bunch of talk about that. That's going to be a huge issue. And whoever wrote that question, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a sense that we can easily blame technology. It's the phones, but every piece of technology has a sort of implied negative, and it's a bit like recognizing what the implied negative is. I have a smartphone. We're on computers. Love technology. Where I can use it, I love it. It's fantastic. It's just a case of recognizing where's the downside and how do we mitigate against the downside.
Yeah, no, that's really good. How do we trust God when we are going through tough times and believe that there is no hope left?
Oh gosh, whoever's asked that question, if it's for yourself, it's hard. I can give you a question, I can give you an answer, and I've often said this in answer to these sorts of questions. I could give you a theological, philosophical answer that will respond to that question. But if that's you going through a hard time, doesn't help much because you're still in a hard time,
No, it's an experience.
and that's hard. and it's a bit like saying, well, why does God allow suffering? Well, whatever answer sounds like a great theological answer, but if you're in the middle of suffering, it doesn't release the suffering. There's a piece of me that what I want to say to you is that where do we ultimately have our trust? Where do we place our trust? And often we place our trust. We live in a wealthy nation, and we can place our trust in what we have acquired. We can place our trust in great healthcare. We can place our trust in pretty good governments, which most of the case around Australia we have. And we end up God becomes a bit of a sidekick because that's where we place our trust. And when it all goes wrong, we've got to ask ourselves, well, where do we actually place our trust? Is the foundational values of my life that there's God that loves me, that sent Jesus for me, and has made a way for me to be with him eternally? Do I trust that? And if I trust that, then I should stand on that. And it's a bit like knowing that, look, we're all going to face hard times. Matt, I got friends. I have a friend who just found out he's got Parkinson's. I got a friend who's just having a number of small strokes, which is impacting his cognitive ability.
Yeah.
Well, my wife and I found out about a friend that she went to school with who had a terrible brain bleed, is now trying to learn how to walk again. Like all of the tough thing about life is all of us are going to be there. All of us are a heartbeat from disaster, like literally a heartbeat from disaster. Nobody knows what tomorrow is going to bring. And that person asking that question has a better grasp of what the future looks like than everybody that's having a good time, because we're all going to get there.
Yeah.
The last time we looked, the mortality rate for humanity still hovered at 100%. So we all need to face these. Mostly our good lives and our good health gives us a buffer from this question, because we can kind of pretend that it's not a question. So what I'm trying to say is, in those difficult times, where's your foundation? What are you standing on? What are you looking to the future for? And remember that God promises to hold you, love you, care for you, be there for you. God doesn't necessarily promise that everything's going to work out just the way you want. And it's one of the great failings of some teachings of the Christian church, where we tend to believe that God's, tomorrow's going to be better than yesterday and next year's going to be off the dial wonderful. That doesn't happen.
No.
Hard things happen. And in the middle of those, know where you place your trust.
Yeah, that's a fantastic answer. How do we believe in God's plan for us when we feel that we are not close to him? That's a good question, connecting the last one, I guess.
Yeah, it is. And it's when I first started in ministry, there was a huge stink about discussion about, does God's plan for you, is there one plan? Is God's plan for you a dot or a circle? And there was a guy that wrote a book about this as well, years and years ago. And it was a whole working out. So sometimes we think that God's plan for us is sort of like a dot. And if I don't get the dot, I've missed God's plan. And I'm, so we're spending all our time going, oh, what's the dot? What's the line? What's the specific plan? And if I miss this plan, somehow I'm going to miss God's goodness in my life and God's plan for me for the future.
Yeah.
There's another way of looking at it, which is God's plan for each of us is a bit like a circle. In other words, it's a bit like God says, here's what I want you to do. Here's the areas that are outside my will for you. And most of them have got to do with values and morals. But inside this circle, you can choose whatever you like. And the example this author used all these years ago was Adam and Eve in the garden, where God said, don't eat from the tree of good and life. And here's the garden and act within it. And then imagine Adam and Eve saying to God, well, we just want to be in your plan and we want to know what you want for us. So tonight, which tree, which fruit should we eat? The apple, the pear, the orange? Like which one should we want to be in your will? And God's answer is, yes. You can do what you like. Yeah, basically, you can choose what you like. No. We don't want to miss out. We want to get your absolute will. The peach, is it the peach? Should we take the peach?
Yeah.
And God, if you think about it, God's gone, Seriously, I don't care. Like, and I think it's really helpful to think about God's will for us as a circle inside which we function. Now, one other caveat on that. That doesn't mean that there aren't times where God speaks to you specifically because he wants you to do a specific thing. And we should be open to that, and we should be ready for that. But my view would be that's almost slightly unusual. What's normal is the circle.
Yeah.
But look for, for those of us in ministry, we often feel God called us into ministry. And that there was a sense of, yes, this is where God wants me to go, and we should pursue those calls. But that doesn't mean that there aren't a whole bunch of other choices that you could make.
Yeah, that's really good. That was such a simple way of saying that. What do you think needs to shift in the local church to respond to the current situations you've been talking about? Small question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty simple question. 1 minute, we'll be done.
Yeah.
Look, I think one of the things I would say, Matt, look, right now across the globe, in all those places that we went, the mega church model, it's not that it's dead, but it's in dire trouble. And that there was this notion that we create this mega church, we have, all this stuff happening, we have the best music, we have the best talks, that sense of the big show seems to be in question. And I wonder whether part of the response to these things is actually an authentic church that loves God, loves each other, and stays informed. Gathers together to be God's people, gathers together to serve the community, gathers together and look after people.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you know what's going to happen? You're going to have the more grace required people. There will be the odd people that will annoy you. Don't push them to the edge. That's why they're there, because you love them. And in the middle of that, I think there'll be a growing sense of that's what we're looking for. As many of you listening would have heard this term. There are people out there saying, the trouble with church, it's become a Coldplay concert followed by a TED talk.
Not far from the truth.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. And that's not to say that great music is not a good thing. I love great worship. I love it. But that's not the future. Yeah. And the TED talk where we all feel good about ourselves and walk away feeling positive, that's not the future either. Yeah. So we've got to take a hard look at some of these questions and answer them as well as we can. But inside an authentic, godly, caring community.
Yeah. No, that's a great answer. I think we've got time for maybe one more.
Okay.
How does the church move forward after the crisis of evangelical credibility that you mentioned at the start there?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. And I think that I think one of the ways that the church has got to move forward in the future is that we can't fall for celebrity culture where somebody draws a crowd and nobody questions their behavior. We've got to make sure that every organization, church and Christian organization, has decent governance structures. And decent governance structures mean that every person is held to account. Olive Tree Media. So I run Olive Tree Media. My wife and I started Olive Tree Media. We are Olive Tree Media. We have an independent board. That independent board is 6 serious people, 4 others with Jane and I. We could be voted out next week.
Yeah.
Every cent spent has to be accounted for. Every year there's a plan about what we're going to do in the next year, and I present the plan and the board comments on the plan. The board are a fully independent board that actually have a serious role in overseeing everything that we do. That ought to be multiplied across the board.
Yeah.
And what's happened, if you look at the rise and fall of Mars Hill, for those of you who haven't listened to it, if you want to put yourself through the 12 or 13 episodes, what you'll see is bad governance structures where somebody is so successful and so popular, drawing such big crowds, nobody's willing to say, you can't do that. And that's what we need to build into every organization.
That's good. I'm going to squeeze one more question in because I think this is a really good one.
Okay.
Why would God create mental illness if he wanted us to be happy?
Yeah, look, mental illness is, I struggle all the time to work out, why would there be mental illness? But then mental illness is no different from cancer. And it's no different from my mate I've just found out who's got Parkinson's disease. The world is a broken place. That's the whole point of Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 2, 1 and 2, we're created to live in a relationship with God. We fall out of that relationship with God through the behavior, the sinful behavior, the fact that sin is not like just doing bad things, it's ignoring God. And then in that came brokenness, and it came brokenness between humanity. It came brokenness between humanity and God, and it became brokenness in who we are as people. And mental illness is a part of that brokenness, just like every health issue is a part of that brokenness. And just like, in a sense, when people act in evil ways, that create crime and war and division within a community, that's about human brokenness as well. Let me just say this about mental illness. Mental illness is, in my view, not really in a different situation than any other sickness or illness that people have. You can't just, prayer is important and you should be praying, but you can't just pray away your mental illness. And you need professional help, and you need people to help you through that mental illness. I worked with somebody who was on my staff. She was one of the most gifted multitaskers and details person that I'd worked with. When I was working at Wynnum Baptist, she was my EA for somewhere between 5 and 8 years. And that whole time, she was on depression medication. She's still on depression medication. She struggles with depression, and it's awful. But that doesn't mean she's any less than anybody else. It just means that we all, mental illness is a part of the whole process. I don't think God sends stuff to people to punish them, or that somehow if you have mental illness that somehow you're less than everybody else. It's just part of broken human nature.
Thanks for that last question, Karl. And thank you for coming on to Way of Life podcast. And why don't we just give them a hand, everybody here?
Good on you guys. It's been great being with you. Appreciate what you're doing, Matt. Thank you guys for sending questions. They're great questions. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks again, Karl. And I hope you have a great rest of your, have a good week, sorry.
Well, let me just tell you this. My week is that I get in a plane tomorrow and fly to England. So that's my week. Dang. So it's going to be okay. and I'll be happy if the weather is good in England, but continues to rain in Manchester for another day.
Is there anything we can do to be supporting you or praying for you as you go over to the UK?
No, this is slightly a holiday. So yeah, it's self-indulgent, but look, you continue to pray for us as we roll out Faith Runs Deep. I know some of the groups in the church are doing Faith Runs Deep. We're looking for a new series next year, but we're really excited about what we're doing there. And we're doing that in schools and in camping ministries and all sorts of different ways, regional gatherings. So we're really excited about that. So continue to pray and support that.
Absolutely. And I hope you have a good holiday. Enjoy yourself.
Thanks, mate. See you, mate.
All right. See ya.
Bye, everybody.